Steve Jessmore has had a long and wonderful career, and it's been hard for him, I know, to narrow down what to show. And if you cut out one picture, it cuts out a decade of his life. So I know we've got a very condensed version of all of his accomplishments. But most notably, Steve was the Robert F. Kennedy Photojournalism Award. He won that award for outstanding coverage of the disadvantaged. He's also a 5-time Michigan Press photographer and photographer of the year. And he won 4 times consecutively. I'll let him tell a little bit about what he's doing now, but he has had a long and wonderful career where he has won awards and had successes all along the way. And so this is a new era for him, but also not so new. So Steve, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thanks for having me. And hopefully I can get through this. I don't know. The Zoom's very new to me, and especially showing images and not sure how fast to go or what to show. So you can see my screen right now, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Pictures. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about my background. Laura Chase gave a lot of good highlights there that I'm really proud of. But I was a community photojournalist for, more than 25 years in Flint, in Saginaw, Michigan. Saginaw is my hometown. I got my start as a kid. I really loved art. I really loved bugs and pond stuff. My big favorite thing was music, though. And music's really kind of what got me into photography. In the 70s, I wanted to go to concerts. My parents didn't want to let me go to concerts, and they said it was too expensive. And so I asked them if I found a way to go for free, if I could go, and they said sure. And I went to the Saginaw News and gave them, we had no cell phones, no computers, no anything. So I gave them my dad's office number, my mom's, our home number, our school office number. I gave them every number I could think of and said, if you ever want me to shoot concerts, I'm here for you. I was 16 years old. And long story short, they called me to the office one day, and I got to shoot George Clinton in Parliament and the Funkadelics, and got to meet George Clinton. And I had no idea what I was doing, and shot pictures of him in the dark hallways doing all the whatever. And it was an incredible experience. But within the next 2 years, I shot over 100 concerts for the Saginaw News. And that got me my start. But I went to college, and this was back in the days of black and white film. The single shot really cameras, you're just shooting one frame at a time. Maybe you had a motor drive. It was just kind of fun. I still love doing it. I got on program board for concerts, but my life path seemed to be pre-med and pre-dent, pre-something. I was in honors. I went in with the goal of getting out in 3 years and going into med school. My first semester, I took 21 credits. Second semester, I think it was 18 and 21, actually. I took a photojournalism class my second semester. Just my 3 roommates had the class. I thought I could sleep in and skip stuff, and I knew enough about basic photography, I thought, to pass it. But I got the bug, and I started working at the school paper, and I'd still did concerts, but I really thought I'd still do some something. That's what my parents wanted me to do, and I just couldn't. So I ended up having all these bio and chemistry and all those credits, and just moved into journalism. Still get out in 3.5 years. Thought I'd beat the job rush. Early 80s, there were no jobs, and ended up staying in my hometown. Got married right out of college. I finally got hired at my hometown paper after 3 years. You talk about photography, and so many people through my life have said, oh, you've got it so easy. All you do is take pictures for a living. You never worked a day in your life, all that kind of stuff. But the career track many of you can probably relate to. I worked full time at my father's camera store out of college, and then I worked virtually every night of the year 50 out of 52 weekends, newly married, trying to, pay my dues to get into photojournalism. And it worked. And I got hired at Saginaw News in 1984. Again, my hometown, got promoted to chief photographer pretty quick, mentored interns, just had a blast, and never really looked back at, what I had to give up or anything, for the career. So, again, we're in journalism at this point. This was a grant that I proposed when I was in Flint. This was in 2004. It was pre-Google Street View. I had the idea for Google Street View. I didn't know how or what. I didn't even know, there was no Google Street View. But I made a pitch to the Mott Foundation in Flint. I got a 6-figure grant to go through and actually create Google Street View with 21 miles of streets in Flint. I took a picture every 5 steps, pieced them all together by hand. It's a little more, I think, artistic than straightforward, the buildings and all that. But that was a great project, a fun experience in Flint. But Google Street View came out in the middle of me doing this and took the wind out of the sails. But it was still a nice project for Flint on the 150th anniversary. I did that while I worked full-time in photojournalism at Flint. We do a lot of sports. I covered the Buick Open for 15 years, led coverage at the Flint Journal. It was a blast. It was during the Tiger high, the major Tiger years where he was just winning every tournament and the crowds were crazy, and, just to have access and not get kicked out by him was a feat in itself, for clicking the shutter too early or whatever. But it was really fun. I did a lot of pro sports. I did spring training for Booth newspapers, which was a group of 8 papers in the state of Michigan. This was a portrait I shot of Cecil Fielder. Had 5 minutes to do it. I got to shoot the '84 World Series. I sat on the field, before I was even full-time. And full disclosure, the only reason I got to sit on the field was I had a 302.8. So they let me sit on the field for 3 games. I was in my early 20s, and it was film. You had 36 frames and somebody grabbing every roll after you shot it. And I shot it for UPI. But this was Gibson's home run to win the series, and I was on the first base side. I shot a lot of stories in my community. This Chris Bird, who ended up being heavyweight champion of the world. He was from Flint. His dad was an Olympic coach in the Olympics. I had to really talk my way into with that. But this, again, journalism was my basic career, and loved every minute, of it. And I think it prepared me, again, for everything I do forward in journalism. We had to tell stories in the community, these big events, kind of localize them. I never did anything really on a national scene. I was a state photographer, around Michigan, but mostly in my hometown of Saginaw and mostly in Flint. And then when I was in Flint, I got to tell some Detroit stories like the closing of Tiger Stadium and put a spin on it and kind of come up with a different way to do it. So this is some of the images I shot the last 6 games at Tiger Stadium. And the last game, I had a second level front basket that I shot the whole game from, other than pregame and postgame. But I remember going here as a 6-year-old probably, so it was really kind of interesting. One of my favorite things I ever did was in Flint, self-initiated column. It was called Sense of Community. Most of this stuff is on my website. All 175 of these columns are on my website if you want to go take a look. Excuse me, but I at my interview going to Flint, I needed a job change from Saginaw, and they created a job for me, but I had an interview. And I sat down at the table and, went through the motions with the editor and the publisher and stuff. And they made small talk, and they looked me straight in the eye and said, "Why the hell would you ever come to Flint? Murder, rape, robbery, the worst of the worst. This town is, in the gutter. Why would you ever come here? You'd go anywhere you wanted." And I really I was taken aback by that because I really did want to come there. And I said, well, number one, you want to let me take pictures, but number two, I bet there's like 93% good people here instead of 94. It's just all how you look at it and what you focus on. So I really wanted to focus on people that still had hope in Flint. And so I did this column in Flint where I wrote it, designed it. The concept was mine. I pitched it for a little 4-column, which was, a 5x7-inch picture in the paper every week and a little bit, a caption. And the editor, after reading my proposal, gave me all but about 4 inches off the bottom of page 5 every Sunday for 5 years. So, but I had full control over it and found all my own subjects. I had 1 day to produce it. And but there's 175 of them, all good people from Flint that still had hope that it could be a better place. So my journalism career, I never, ever would have left. Everything crashed in 2008. You guys probably, a lot of you went through that whole thing. Our newsroom went from 125 to who knows what, 20, 30 people. We got called in. They said they wanted to keep me, but they were going to take my department from 10 people to me. At that point, I had 25 years in, and I said, well, I'll take my buyout. And I stayed through February of 09, and I went to Myrtle Beach for 6 years. I got a job offer to be photo editor there. I had six photographers there, and I'm going to switch over to something else. Laura Chase, do I just, how do I get out of here?
Close the big box, right? Yes, click where you're clicking. Is it frozen? Did you close the big window? There we go. Okay, and now I guess you have another tab open in Photo Mechanic.
Nope.
Oh, where's the rest of your pictures?
They're all right here right there. Can you see?
Click screen share.
I don't see anything to click, quite honestly. Maybe I closed it. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah, it sort of floats around sometimes.
All right.
There you go. Okay, and you're going to want to again open up that first screen that you've got, the first picture you've got, and then go to screen share again, and you're going to want to click on the large version of the photo.
Got it. Right?
There you go.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry. So I stayed in Myrtle Beach 6 years. We went from 6 photographers to 2 photographers. I left in 2013. I got a call from my alma mater, CMU. I'd been very active at CMU most of my life. Journalism degree.
I'm watching this.
Journalism degree. I taught the capstone photojournalism class while I worked in Flint for 7 years. It was a wonderful place that had great memories, and it was a chance for me to try something new and apply photojournalism skills at CMU. So I basically was a journalist. They told me I wasn't. I could fake and pose things, but I really hate doing that. I tried to capture, spontaneous events and just to show off the campus, which was to me pretty easy. These little moments. It's such a beautiful place. But I learned about branding, and I learned about, the color maroon and gold were our colors, and trying to get, all different kinds of branding. I learned to work with designers even more. If somebody would have put a headline across my picture as a journalist, I would have blown a gasket. But at CMU, I really got into this where I could leave, negative space and empty space and see. I really loved to see how they used my pictures. But it was fun to document a community and the beauty of a community that I, again, had so many connections to through the years. It was a exhausting job in a lot of ways, and I probably made it that way myself. But I would usually start every morning by getting out in good light to try to find features, and then I would do my other stuff, and then I would go back to finding features.
Mostly about his career, which is interesting.
And but these are some of the images I came up with at CMU, that were used for websites and promotional materials and, bulletins and, everything, website, galleries. We had a huge online presence. I really love the whole photojournalism thing, 99% of the pictures with people. I just love being able to blend in. Like the people will say like a fly in a wall, and I kind of think it's more like a spider in a web. You sit back and when you see something, you zoom in and you grab it and you get back again, to your place and just watch and grab real moments and just let people forget about you. I just don't have any problem, getting people to not look at me, which I think is really good. I don't know why that is, but I routinely just will walk away if they do and have people just be themselves, which is a wonderful way, feature photography and the patience. I have a lot of that, which I think will pay off in my photos you're going to see next. But, I just love capturing real moments, happy moments. I'd rather focus on things that are good than bad, quite honestly. Journalism, I understand the reason we had to do both, but, CMU, we had a number of negative events and I was not allowed to go anywhere near them. So, that was really strange for me not to go to some kind of police event, but I didn't do it. And, but I enjoyed every moment of just capturing life around me. And higher ed, I really fell in love with the learning and, the students they were so inquisitive and excited and interactive, engaged. It just was a wonderful, wonderful thing, which I've carried through now. This is how I make my living. 2008, I left CMU. I do primarily higher ed photography for numerous community colleges and universities other than CMU, mostly Michigan still. I haven't really ventured out yet, but they've kept me busy enough. We're gonna, start getting into, again, the freelance career, but this is the same sort of thing I'm doing for most everybody else now. I truly believe that no assignment should be treated any different than any other assignment. I don't think just somebody's a bank president, then the next, minute I'm with, a custodian, I should treat either one of them any differently. And, I learned that in journalism and I think I carry that through to every assignment just deserved my full attention. And I love to collaborate. This was a dance school and, they did a sort of an art thing around campus where they went out and danced in spaces and I followed them. But I just love everything about it. We were the Chippewas. We had a lot of interactions with the Chippewas, the Native Americans that had a reservation right outside of town. It was another set of rules to learn, but I got along really great with them and, they trusted me and made a lot of pictures. They never really turned me away, but we had a lot of powwows on campus. And so I had a lot of opportunity to photograph Native Americans. I did zero sports, but I did so much sports. I didn't end up doing hardly any action, but I photographed everything around the action for CMU, for, again, pamphlets, brochures, website, social media. It's something I never really had to deal with in photojournalism, the social media. We did in Myrtle Beach. We had a wonderful presence and led McClatchy and in the social media numbers, out of 20 some papers, I think it was in Myrtle Beach, our small little paper, but we were a destination city. But I really grew, I loved growing the Facebook and, showing prospective students what their life might be like when they came. Again, it just was a blast to shoot. I love moments, but I love moments when they tell stories and when people trust me and when they allow me to just enter into their space and not be, made nervous or just uncomfortable. It was a blast. I got to shoot for the alumni magazine, and I was the only photographer for CMU for 5 years. I took the place of two that were there almost 30 years at the same time, and I had some interns that helped me out. But it was again a big job. Often 6 days a week, fun. So leading up to everything else I'm going to talk about, the 6 days a week, the journalism career of so many hours. Again, so many of you can relate to that. We just, when you were off, you were off. Somebody else owned my pictures. I was burned out by the time I got done making pictures for somebody else, which really were pictures for me. But I just didn't want to do anything else, and I wanted to spend time. I had 3 kids, married, first marriage, 32 years. I tried to balance it. It was difficult many times, but, I balanced it and I think did pretty well. 3 adult kids, but it just left little time for me to run off and go shoot some, can try to do this again now, Laura Chase. See if I can figure this out again.
Yeah, you started to touch on something that I know we wanted to make sure you talk about, which is how pre-pandemic, or I guess post-pandemic, this is the first time that you've really owned your own images, since you're not shooting for somebody,
Right.
You're shooting for yourself. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like for you and what you're learning and if you like it and etc.?
Yeah, I think, again, jumping forward, I got to figure this all out again. I'm sorry. Moving forward, again, I had no rights to any of my photos. I just never even, felt like I could, I'm sorry. Try to get this up there, but technical stuff isn't my just not seeing it as I hit share screen. All right, now I'll just put up.
Here we go.
All right.
Awesome.
So I've never owned the rights to my photos. And again, I'm getting a little, maybe fast forward a little bit, but I think that was one of the things I learned as I started to get into the bird photography, that they are my pictures now. And that allows me to try to make an income stream with this, and to just realize that if somebody wants a print, I can sell them a print, or I can publish them in a magazine, or I can try to license them, or I can do all these things. And they're things that I need to learn how to do. As a photojournalist, I have zero marketing skills, other than selling myself and having people trust me. But I don't know anything about this side of it, the entrepreneurship, other than the fact, again, I can't even get a hold of my pictures from my journalism days now. They won't give me access to them. So the only things I have are, images that I shoved in folders as I left. The bird photography, I have, already hundreds of thousands of photos that I haven't edited or gone through or figured out what to do with them yet. So I look at that as sort of a legacy that could last, if I can get my act together, longer than me. And, I do feel like, there are things avenues I should pursue, like stock photography and, licensing, especially some of my images. So I'm going to try this again. So how would you like me to jump into this?
Well, I think, why don't you just tell us how you ended up shooting birds? What did your wife tell you? I liked what your wife told you.
Yeah. Well, I got remarried in 2018, moved to Grand Rapids, started freelancing. Didn't really know what I was going to do, but, she told me just, why don't you move over here? She had 3 children. They're all married. They all lived in Grand Rapids. Her job was in Grand Rapids. They all moved from the east side of the state, Saginaw area. And so, my kids were in New York City and Omaha and Peoria, and it didn't really matter where I lived. And so what I needed was benefits. And, we had a great relationship, been together 4 years, I think. And so we ended up getting married, and I moved to Grand Rapids, and she said, just do something. Don't sit around. The money will follow. And just, it's never not before. Just figure out and just do something. So I got over there, and right away I began thinking, I love higher ed. I love the journalism, but I don't really want to do journalism at that point. Straight journalism, like say freelancing for the newspaper, which wasn't paying anything. I'm going to try to do day rates and work in higher ed. And so I started reaching out. One of the beautiful things is photojournalists, most of us have worked with many journalists who now work in PR. So I was able to reach out to a number of people I'd worked with throughout the years in Michigan and reconnect, and they were all in higher ed. And so I ended up very quickly getting a pretty decent higher ed freelance business going. 2018, I did well. 2019, I had over 100 invoices, worked 100 days plus. I did better financially than I ever did. 2020 came, it was going to be as good as 2019. March 8th, 2020 hit, there were all these rumblings about this COVID thing, and my phone rang off the hook on March 8th, 2020. And virtually everything I had the rest of the year was canceled. I think, again, many of you can relate to that. All of us are creatures of habit to a point. We get into that, whether you have a job or whatever that revenue stream was, we didn't know how long it was going to last, a week, 2 weeks, a month, who knew? And so I kind of wallowed for a little bit. All my work ended. I got all my editing done. I thought, okay, I'm going to make a plan. I'll watch videos and learn things. I'll call other photographers that I really admire and just say, how did you do that? I'll try to improve myself, but I didn't know how I was going to improve myself. I just thought, well, I'll try to do that. But after about a month or so, it was really, just for me, depressing. And I was just holed up in my office and not seeing anybody anyway. That was an adjustment on its own, going freelance where I had no staff around me and I was always the mentor and the chief photographer, so I had nobody. It's just really wild. And so I was wallowing around, and my wife kind of just looked at me, and she gave me this lecture, and she said, Steve, and I'm going to read this because it's perfect. She said, God put us on this earth for who knows how long. You have to live life every day to the fullest, make every day count as it was your last. She said, this is a gift of time. Don't waste it. Do what you always wanted to do. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know what I always wanted to do. That's perfect. She's right. But what do I want to do? If we're given that time, I never had time. And so I really thought about that, and I kind of wallowed around. I did a lot of, yard stuff and cleared out the woods and trees, and I thought about it. And I never really thought about bird photography. And we have this beautiful cottage up here on Torch River, and I'd sit out on the porch and, but I'd sit out on the porch, and once in a while a bird would fly by, and maybe I'd grab my camera once in a while. And there's in the summertime, a chain of boats that go between all the lakes up to Torch Lake and the Sandbar, which is a crazy place. If anybody's from Michigan, you've probably heard about the Sandbar with thousands of boats on the 4th of July and nuts. It's just police arrests, crazy. So none of this stuff, it just really wasn't inspiring me. But one day after she said that, I walked by the slider on the back porch, and I did a triple take. There were all these little birds out on the deck. And so I stopped, and I thought, well, I'm just going to be I had an old 300-2.8 and some teleconverters. I'm just going to sit out there today. It's a beautiful day. I got nothing to do. Just going to make some photos. I made some photos and I posted them. And, it was just, again, birds at the feeder and trying to not show the feeder and trying to, just get some nice tight portraits of the birds. And I posted them and people went nuts. I just put them on Facebook and everybody's like, oh my God, these are, beautiful. I've been, shut in for a month or two. And, you're really, bringing it. It's really nice to see this kind of stuff. I didn't really think much about it. I really didn't do many more bird pictures. This was in about April, May of 2020. And then I'd go up north. And so occasionally I'd take the lens and I shot this picture, which I thought was really amazing, and I got the reflection and the duck. But, again, I posted it and got some people liking it and some more comments about how, things were, you're bringing outside to me. I can't get outside. We couldn't isolate up north because governor had us frozen in our hometowns, but finally she allowed us to. So my wife works internationally and does a lot of Zoom meetings. She was able to do them from up here with internet. And I just, would come up with her, but I really didn't have any purpose. I did an assignment for Retailers Magazine, which is a trade magazine in Michigan. And the assignment was how hard it is to get kayaks during COVID. And I'd never been in a kayak. One of my best friends, he was a videographer at CMU. I can just remember, and Tom will know Adam. And it's like, Adam is a crazy guy, but he's like, you can't get in a kayak. They're death traps. You're going to roll over. You're going to lose your cameras. You're going to die. And the kayaks were sitting there after I did the shoot. And I thought, I'm just going to try this thing. And it was like, I walked in the house and I said, oh my God, that was the greatest event of my life. And, I'm out on the river. I didn't realize across from us in the marsh is like this wonderful, pond system. And I just looked at the cattails all the time. And I thought, I'm going to go back there and I'm going to take my cameras. And my wife's like, well, you better get a good kayak because those are expensive cameras. And so I got a decent kayak that the water flew through, and I got a water bag to put my cameras in, when I went out there. And I just started hanging out in the marsh. And I would go out, at first I just went out and then I started going out earlier and earlier in the early morning, late night. And all of a sudden the ducks started flying over my head and I tried to capture them and I couldn't do it. And I tried and it was dark, and early, and they were fast. And I said, this is going to be my purpose at this point. These ducks, I got to learn how to do this as a photojournalist. We had to do everything okay, at least okay. You had to be able to come back maybe with an A1 picture. And so long story short, that's what I started doing, and got more into it. But I would notice things around me and the nature. And I think I was having kind of a rekindling of my youth a little bit. My dad did documentary 16 millimeter photography. He had a camera store. He really liked birds. I never thought about birds. I liked elk and things like that. But it really started getting to me. And so I would just photograph. And I really started getting into it. But the challenge, was the access. Number one, I knew nothing about birds. So just learning about something new. And I think we can really apply this to whatever your passion is, whatever you might want to do, or, you all have your time and your own time you want to devote to something. And I saw it again as my paying my dues, almost like I was back in my college days to photojournalism, where I knew to get better, I had to really put in the time and I had to learn about my subjects. And all my lessons from photojournalism, I had to be patient. I had to drive around an enterprise and look and try to find things. And early on, I did a lot more of that, where I'd visit metro parks or, places where I'd seen other people post on Facebook these great pictures of birds. And I'm like, man, I can't get within a mile of a sandhill crane. Like, I'm going to go backwards, but how are they doing it? And I went down to Kensington Metro Park. I sat down on a park bench. And when I was sitting there, I had 4 sandhill cranes peck at me. They came so close. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I didn't enjoy it. but I made this picture the first day I went down there before I sat down and pecked at me. I was a ways away. And I realized that access is such a huge thing, just like in photojournalism. But to me, that wasn't the kind of access I was really looking for. This was before I got pecked. This was another sandhill crane that first day, but he was sleeping on the edge of the water. I snuck up behind a tree and shot it with about a 400 millimeter lens. But this was really the first picture I shot in the first day, where I really got some pictures that I thought, these are kind of special. You know, I really like these. And again, I kept posting on Facebook, and people were thanking me. And I started to get photographers reaching out to me, and they're like, you know, Jessmore, you're killing it. And you're really inspiring me to do some kind of something with photography. So for me, these were the rewards that I was getting. And that's really all I thought of this. Still at this point, it was just something to fill time during COVID, to use my creativity, my sense of light, my, you know, all the lessons I learned through the years, and try to make something more unusual than 90% of the pictures I saw online were just, and again, there's nothing wrong with them. They're done very well, but just birds sitting there. They're birds on a branch, you know, perched. And so I tried to take my moment, you know, skills and anticipation and learning. I started trying to learn the habits and learn, you know, when they were doing what they were going to do next. And
Steve, I'm going to stop you for a second, because I would really like you to talk about what kind of gear you're using at this point in your bird adventure, because it's not what people would expect. It's not the best of the best of the best of the gear.
yeah, no, I that's a good point. I started out, and I'm really pretty proud of all this, actually, for the most part. But I used my old Canon gear for quite a while, and I also had Fuji mirrorless. That was my walk around cameras, because the Canon stuff was so heavy, the DSLRs and the 300-2.8s. And so I bought before this, I got a puppy a few years earlier. I bought a Fuji XT2, I think it was, an X Pro, and I had a 100-400 zoom, and that's what I shot this with a teleconverter. And you know, so I was trying to shoot all these pictures so far were all shot with either the old Canon or the Fuji mirrorless. And you know, the f-stops aren't 2.8, you know, I'm shooting with a 1.4 converter at f8 or f9 or something like that. And you know, the autofocus is much better than the manual focus I had when I started in photography, but not good at all with acquiring. And you know, you really had to be on something. But so I'm trying to do this with that, and you know, I'm getting frustrated because my keeper rate wasn't real high. You know, I was missing some things that I thought I should have, but I was also persistent and again put in the time. But this is with the Fuji, and it's sharp as sharp. Great camera, great zoom, wonderful, you know, wonderful lens in the 100-400. And the same thing. This was probably a eighth of a second at 3200 with the Fuji 100-400 or something, you know, handheld. I tend to handheld things all the time. But, you know, so the Fuji was good, but I was getting frustrated, and I ended up switching to Sony. I talked to a lot of photographers. I needed an upgrade on my professional equipment because I do this professionally. My file sizes weren't big enough for a lot of my clients. So I ended up, I got a Sony A9 II and a 200-600 zoom, and that's what I had. And that's what I used. And that was my first entry into the Sony family. I shot this, I believe, still with the Fuji, if I'm not mistaken. But right at the end of December, I bought the Sony A9 II. So December 28th, I think, actually, to get it in on my tax write-off for the year before, for the 2020, and started using the 200-600. And right away, I noticed it acquired subjects better. You know, it was very sharp. What a great, you know, great lens. Nice camera body, had a little bit nicer files, I thought, than I was used to. the higher ISOs. I could get away with a little bit higher. There are months in Michigan that we don't see sunshine in the winter. So that was part of my issue and still is a huge part of my issue. But, I was really getting some pictures I really loved with that Sony 200 to 600. And, I tended, that's my go-to, that was my go-to for quite a while last year. And I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. But I have a whole set of Sony gear now. I've gone all in. Um, but
Hold on, you can't just say that. So Sony wooed you, right?
Pardon me?
I said Sony wooed you, right? They sent you some goodies.
Sony did woo me. I had an artisan of light reach out to me and say, "So I hear you're shooting with Sony. Like, what are you using?" And I said, "Well, I'm A92 and a 200 to 600." And he wrote me back. He's like, "No way." And I said, "Yeah, that's all I have. I use what I have. That's what we always had to do. You use what you have. They're tools, And but it's a really nice tool. It's kind of like my golden hammer now. That 200 to 600. And someday I hope to save up for a 600 F4." And he wrote me back and said, "Well, I got to get some better equipment in your hands." And so they sent me like 2 suitcases full of stuff, and I tried it out. So it totally whet my appetite, for the rest of it, because they sent me a 600 F4 and they sent me a number of other, like another body A7, whatever. And so I ended up in 2 installments buying some other equipment, but I didn't jump. I'm going to get into it right now. You probably all know I swept the professional division of Sony, or of the Audubon professional contest. I had to enter. I had a number of people, some of them on here, that said, "You should really enter this contest." And I didn't really know what it was. And I Googled it, and it's like the bird contest. And I thought, all right. I had started donating money to Audubon earlier in 2020, just when I got into birds. I thought, well, it's a good place to put some money. But I didn't know anything about birds. I was learning about birds. I thought this will help me do it. I become passionate about birds. I got the Sony 200 to 600 zoom. I got the lens. I thought, I got to go someplace where I'm going to see some wildlife. So I went over to Kensington Nature Center the first day I was using it. This was the first bird I ever saw with that lens. I was with another photographer. We hiked around the lake, Wild Wing Lake, and saw this red-tailed hawk and photographed it from every angle you could. And he said to me, "Well, I'm going to take off." And it was, 15, 20 minutes into it. And I said, "Well, you're seriously going to leave?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got enough pictures." And I said, "Well, I'm going to stay." And so I followed the hawk for 2.5 hours with that lens and that camera the first time. And I missed so many pictures, but I got a whole bunch of other pictures. And it really gave me a chance just to be patient and to let things happen, let birds be birds, let animals be animals, let people be people, let your subject tell their story. Don't tell it for them, and don't sell yourself short, and don't cut short if you don't have to. I always heard a bird in the hand. Well, it's, to me, really true. If you have something in front of you, doesn't matter to me what it was, just like if it's a bank president or a custodian. If you have something good, you stick with it and try to, put your spin on it. And so I hung out with this hawk from a distance, got within probably, 30 yards of it. It woke up after an hour, hour and a half, sort of fanned his tail. And I got a few pictures, and then it took off. I had been there a good hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes already out in the cold. 3,200. This is 3,200, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a January day, and January 5th, I think it was. And just dark as dark. But, I was learning to use the camera on a subject that was, again, I didn't know what I was going to do. But so I followed it, and it took off. It went about 100 yards. Me and another guy walked down. We saw it. It was jumping up and down in the leaves, trying to scare up whatever it missed. It flew straight up in the tree, shot some more pictures from a distance. And then it dove on. It literally you heard a screech below that, the tree where it was digging up, you know, the leaves, landed on top of the chipmunk. I didn't get it. I missed it. It turned around, flew straight at my head, probably 30 yards away, it dangling a chipmunk. I missed every single picture, came right at my head. I had a duck, flew up in a tree that was laying sideways and with the chipmunk. And I just was in a spot news mode and just was shooting. And, you know, it proceeded to tear apart the chipmunk and eat it, which wildlife does. That's pretty much what they're all trying to do. And but this was a picture one of the 4 pictures I entered in the Audubon contest, and this is the one that took honorable mention in the professional category. But it was shot with a 200 to 600 Sony zoom and the A9 II. We're going to get quickly to the other one, but I was still, you know, shooting the 200 to 600, you know, zoom. This is learning things like topaz, you know, denoise, and this is ISO 12,800, and it was still dark. It wasn't even daylight yet, and I'm running at Kensington on another day and shot this as they, you know, did their thing. And they got that shot, you know, same thing using the zoom and the low winter light. You're seeing very little sunlight here. And that's what I was doing with that zoom, but I was getting great stuff with it. You know, it was nice, just a little bit, not real shallow depth of field most of the time, and, you know, cropped pretty tight most of the time, or cropped up, but such a gorgeous lens. And it's still one that I use frequently, you know, even though I have better glass, you know, bigger glass, faster glass now. This was the Loner 600 f4 they gave me, you know, and I noticed right away the crispness was a little bit different, a little shallower depth of field for you photographers that are here. So this is picture later in January, early February. I went out looking for eagles. You know, it'd been a month. I had the 200 to 600 zoom, and I was out by Muskegon and out in the country looking for eagles. I saw a hawk, and I stopped my car, flew across the road, got his tail end, missed it totally, kind of bummed, looked to my right. In the ditches, there was this cardinal, which I'd never really seen one on the ground out in the country in the middle of nowhere. And it was flying from weed to weed to weed to weed. And I watched it for a while, and I rolled down all my car windows and opened my sunroof so all the heat would get out of my car. I learned quickly that you get the heat waves, and it makes fuzzy pictures if you're trying to shoot with a long lens out of your car window in the wintertime, or if you have your car running. At least for me, it did. So I turned off the car, watched, saw him land on this weed at the right, and thought, well, I've been watching him now for a number of weeds. He's going to fly to the next weed, which was directly to the left. And this was the first frame I shot. And then the next frame, it was out of the frame. But I ended up cropping it like this. And this was the first place winner for the Audubon contest this year in the professional division. So a picture that I did not edit out the first time I went through the edit. I was still bummed I didn't see any hawks. You know, I kind of went against my own rule about everything's as important as everything else. Didn't give it a chance. And I went back a couple days later and saw it and posted it, and it kind of went viral. But, you know, again, a real surreal event. Not a professional bird photographer, never was. I can't say that I hope I never will be, because I think I'm heading that way. But, you know, it was a very surreal event to think that I could have 2 pictures actually sweep that division. Interrupt anytime
Steve,
you want.
we've got a question from somebody who wants to hear the story about you sitting on under your tree on the river.
All right. Well, I've got a lot of pictures, but can I get to that in just a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I think we all are just dying to see more work.
What I am is a community photographer. I've always been a community photojournalist. I've always been one that's been more than satisfied to be where I am. I even have a thing on my wall about being content, an old cross stitch that I found at an antique store from the 1800s. And it's just about being content. And I am so happy. I have the greatest life. I have the greatest wife. I have someone that supports me. But I've always felt fortunate to be a member of a community. and I'm in a new community now, but I feel like I'm a community birder, where earlier I went over to Kensington and to different metro parks 2-3 hours away, and I just thought that's what I had to do. And I've realized I don't. And as I shoot projects, these are mostly what you're going to see now, mostly from the Torch River. And they're either shot from a kayak or from beneath my little tree. I wear full camo most of the time. I've even got white camo now for the snow. It really does make a difference. I never felt legit enough to wear camo. I don't hunt, I don't do anything, but now I have so much camo, it's unbelievable. And, I just really like sitting, watching, being patient, just being in our little strip of land up north on the Torch River. Most of these pictures are shot within that probably square mile. We go up north. My wife works. If I don't have any work, this is what I do. I go out. I spend usually 3-4 hours in the morning if I'm up north, and I'll spend the same 3 hours at night if we're up here, sitting under the tree or in the kayak, shooting pictures, like watching the habits of the birds that are around me, seeing the change in wildlife, which is really wonderful on a river. It doesn't freeze. I'm seeing migrations. I'm seeing the birds come and go. I'm seeing plant life change. This I'm being exposed to a lot of different birds. The last couple were from the Shiawassee Flats, which is a Shiawassee National Refuge over by Saginaw. I do occasionally still go over there. I love it. It's not commercialized at all. There aren't a lot of people around. There's tremendous wildlife, and it's a refuge, but it's not like you get really close. But if you sit, you do see a lot of migrations, a lot of sandhill cranes, and this is a blue-winged teal, some different things I wouldn't see up north. This is a female red-winged blackbird. This was shot from beneath my tree, a barn swallow. At this point, I won the Audubon. I thought I won some money with the Audubon. It didn't pay for the lenses, but I had a chance. I ordered a 600 f4 at that point. I figured I kind of used to have fast glass, so I wanted some fast glass again. But I never would have done this normally, but I had somebody get rid of a brand new 400 2.8 that had it, that didn't like it, and he gave me like $3,000 off. So I bought the 400 2.8 and I used that during the 6 months it took me to get the 600 f4. But that's what I primarily use now for my kayak. And I shot this with a Sony A1 and a 400 2.8. I have shot tens of thousands of swallow pictures, and I probably have less than, I don't know what, in focus, a very, very small percentage. It's really something you have to be persistent at. I shot this from my kayak. We have the mute swans, babies. I'd never seen the babies before. I had no idea how close I was getting, because I was paddling and looking through the lens and paddling and looking through the lens and trying to get close. And I got hissed at and put down my zoom lens and realized I was zoomed all the way out, and I was pretty darn close. And so I paddled the other way, but I've been attacked by the mute swans on my kayak, where they've come at me not knowing, in camo sitting there. I've had to splash them and yell at them, and they're very big, mean birds. But this is shot on our property up north. Hummingbird sat out with a 400 2.8 one morning. I just really enjoy what's around me. This was shot right on the edge of the river, right in front of me at dusk. The only time I ever saw it, mother merganser and babies. But I can tell you what every picture is, but Laura, Chase, if you have any other questions, this is my tree, coming. I'm noticing things around me, just as I did as a community photographer. I'm not out just to shoot birds. I don't really know what I'm out to do. I'm getting a little clearer idea now. I'm starting to think that I'm working on a project in my mind of the Torch River and the wildlife and what's around me. Kind of like Eugene Smith out my window, here's Steve Jessmore out from my little tree or something in my kayak. So
You've got
this,
your
no,
calendar, so you have begun doing projects.
I have.
We're hitting the hour mark for our 30 minutes with Steve Jessmore.
Oh,
One question that I have is, what are your upcoming goals and ambitions now? And if anybody else has questions they'd like to add into the chat, um, I'm sure, Steve, do you mind hanging around for a little bit more?
no, I'm good. Whatever. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
cool. So if
I
people
don't-
want to add some question to the chat, then we can stick around for a little while extra. But yeah, I'd really like to know, you really knocked it out of the park your first year by sweeping the Audubon competition. What are your goals and ambitions now?
Well, honestly, I guess, again, it's so surreal. I never expected that and never probably expect to ever do anything like that again. But that doesn't mean I can't take great pictures and tell great stories. And I have a way of working. I was always a project photographer. So I think it helps me to think about projects and, um, just groups of pictures, I guess. And so that's what I'm trying to do now, is just really force myself to not just shoot birds, but to shoot some other things too. But I do hope to do maybe, work towards some books. I published a calendar for the first time. I didn't know this was going to be a moneymaker. I think I got jump started with the Audubon, definitely. I never, ever, ever thought this is what I would do. I had the idea once in my mind, thinking about when I retired, that maybe I would do this. I can remember honestly just saying, nah, I'll never do that. I do see myself doing it now, though. I'm 62. I'm still freelancing. I hope to have them kind of go the other way, where I'm doing a lot more birds and a lot less, college work at some point. I've gotten a commission, though, to document a lake in Grand Rapids for a public library, which is on that lake, the Friends of the Library. So there's a lot of potential there with the potential book and some permanent display work. I've been doing work for land conservancies, and I did a calendar, which I didn't think, again, I thought I'd get stuck with most of them. I did 4 orders of 100 in the end, though, and I've sold out 350 out of the 400.
Can you keep scrolling through the photos while you speak?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
The people want
And
more.
pardon me.
I said the people want more. I'm
Wow.
going to pop in a few of these other questions that we've been getting. So let me read out a couple and you can speak to them. Besides the swans, did the birds and other wildlife get used to seeing you in your kayak? And also, can you talk more about what it was like to get comfortable bringing your gear on the kayak? We've got somebody who would like to try it, but they're concerned about water damage.
Yeah, the birds are, I don't think they think I'm a human when I'm sitting in the kayak. I do think they're a little bit, I think in general, birds are very aware of the human form, as are most animals. And the camo I've found has helped that a lot. Camo in the kayak has helped that a lot. I'm also learning to be a stationary photographer. I don't move around a lot unless nothing happens for the first couple hours, so I tend to think if the birds know I'm there, they take off. If they don't know I'm there, my rule of thumb is I try to get in place a half hour before sunset. Or sunrise. That doesn't mean I leave a half hour before in the kayak. That means I'm in place, a half hour in the dark. There's enough light to paddle by usually, but I try to get somewhere and sit there. That helps a lot. Because then they come and they don't know you're there, and I tend to get a lot of nice pictures that way. This duck did not see me, flew in, hit the water, had eyes as big as pie plates, flew off the other direction immediately as he touched down when he saw me, but did not see me coming in with the camo. So, some birds like swans don't pay too much attention to me most of the time, but most of the ducks are pretty wary. Egrets, herons are pretty wary unless you go to a refuge. This was right across from my tree, though. I didn't know I was under there and waited till a boat scared it off.
So what kind of advice would you give to an aspiring nature photographer?
Again, I think it's not so much the equipment, quite honestly. I mean, within reason, Sony, Sigma, Tamron. I know a lot of great wildlife photographers are using the 200 to 600 zoom. You have to make an investment, but you don't have to make a $15,000 investment. Nikon, Canon, Sony, to me, they're all pretty interchangeable right now. I do use mirrorless cameras. I would suggest anyone that's thinking about getting into it, think about mirrorless. I love, they're a little bit smaller. You can make the shutter go totally silent. I've had deer within probably 15 feet of me and no shutter sound, just taking pictures from a blind. It doesn't scare them at all. They have, as you meter, you see it's a video screen. So you see your exposure on the screen, which is really nice on the fly, that you can change it up. Sony has so many dials that are customizable too, and I'm sure Nikon and Canon do, that you can learn and do on the fly with changing ISO, shutter speed, all the things you need to change. So I would just say, look at getting an entry-level camera and one of those zooms and go for it. And, again, sunlight helps, especially with those lenses, but it doesn't mean you can't get good pictures early and late with the ISO capabilities.
Steve, thank you for sharing so much of your time with us. If you want to finish up showing your photos, I think we're going to let people get back.
I'll just roll through and thank you. And I'm sorry. Yeah. I just don't know how to compress.
Don't be sorry. It's been wonderful. And we're all sitting here still watching. So we're all happy.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I publish regularly on Instagram at Steve Jessmore. I try to post 2-3 times a week. I try to be really, I really take care in what I judge. This is one of my favorite pictures I've shot this year. These are shovelers. I worked that scene for well over an hour as they swirled around feeding before I had something that stuck out to me. But again, just if you're aspiring into nature, just be really patient. You've got such a wonderful community of people that know so much, that are so, willing to share it with you, even photographers, which is great. It's just, it's been a wonderful way to isolate during COVID, and I see myself moving forward. But even if it's not birds, I said this earlier, just follow your heart. Who knows what it's going to be? Realize that gift of time, whatever time you have, just really make good use of it, for yourself, and find your own creativity. There's my little tree right out there on the right. That's my view from my porch that I used to just sit and look at. But I hide under that little pine tree to the right and sit there on the bend of the river and just watch. So you get a little better feel. But yesterday I had 2 eagles come right over my head, never saw me. Ducks flying in, again, full camo. It's just a wonderful way to spend time and be creative, and something I never foresaw before COVID. So it's definitely a blessing that not that COVID happened, but that I was able to at least come out of it with something positive, I think. So.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I see we've got one last question from Sam. Sam, I knew we'd hear from you because of the higher ed. I talked to Steve about you last night. I was like, you guys need to be in touch. But as things return to normal, are you hoping to get back to work or stick exclusively with nature? And then we're going to sign off after this.
Yeah, I am getting back to work. Definitely things are picking up. But again, I am making revenue from the birding. So it's kind of a good give and take right at this point.
Awesome.
Another few years.
Well, y'all can buy prints and Steve's calendar at his website. I just ordered one last night. And thank you so much, Steve, for all of your time and experience. And I hope you can scroll through the chat really fast and see all of the love you're getting through the chat. People love you and love your work. And this has been a wonderful use of your time. I guess.
Well, it's been
a wonderful time.
Everybody feel free to message me or email me if you have questions or whatever. I'll be happy to try to help out, just like I was helped out by so many friends and birders. And again,
Well,
Just
you're the
find your
consummate
passion.
mentor. That's why I've known you,
Yep.
having worked with you for 1 week and stayed in touch all these years. It's just who you are. So thank you, Steve. And thank you, everybody. And check out the APA-DC website for upcoming events. We've got a lot of stuff coming up.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Steve.